for the big holiday season, and that means big-time football, both college and the NFL. Want to let you know that we are brought to you today courtesy of New Works Plumbing of Sacramento. Locally owned for over 20 years, New Works has a fix for you. For your plumbing needs and repairs, just go to sacserviceplumbing.com or call the number on your screen. New Works Plumbing, they've got a fix for you. So, man, oh man, do we have a lot to talk about. And coming up in just a moment, it will be the man, Sean Salisbury. And it is an absolute pleasure to talk football with Sean Salisbury. And then following our conversation, I'll talk some Sacramento Kings basketball. Sean, hope you had a good weekend, buddy. How's everything?
Everything's good, man. Good to be with you. Thank you. I sure did.
All right. What impressed you the most about watching Brock Purdy play yesterday?
Command of an offense that he's basically been in charge of for 2 weeks. Just the fact that he's using every part. He's still not trying to make big plays, and in the process of it, as we talked last week, they would come, and they did. He found open guys. He didn't try to do too much, was very good with his feet, and only threw it 21 times. But I think Kyle probably trusts him, Shanahan, to throw it more than that, but they didn't need to. Their defense was lights out against Tampa and Brady, and he didn't back down from one of the top 5 defenses in the league in Tampa. He just feels, and from the optics for me, that there's a command and the guys rally around him. And after one start and 2 appearances, he seems to be a guy that's been in the offense for 2 or 3 years and has what appears to be great command of what they're trying to do. And he's doing enough. And there'll come a time when they're going to have to throw it more, and the defense is going to give up more than they gave up to Brady and that team. But the command and the way he seems to be in complete control of what's going on in this infancy, it's a bit mind-boggling already.
Obviously, I'm not going to compare him to what happened years ago when Trent Green went down in the preseason at Kurt Warner, but I'm going to ask you, because how many guys do you think are on NFL rosters right now that nobody's really heard of because they're not the number one, but if they had an opportunity, they might be able to be an everyday starting quarterback in the NFL?
Well, I think that you'll find that there's more than one, but not 20 of them, Grant. I'm talking about at that position, right? There's more that you kind of who you are, but every now and then you'll get a Kurt Warner. I remember, I'll never forget, I was at the game. Trent Green got hurt in a preseason game against the Chargers. I was covering it for ESPN. And Trent Green goes down. I can remember he was having I think he was like 28 of 32 in the preseason to that point. And he blows out his knee when Rodney Harrison unfortunately had hit him. And I can remember the next day calling Mike Martz. I was there that night, then went back to ESPN. I called Mike, who's a friend, the offensive coordinator. I said, Mike, what are you going to do? He said, I don't know. We're going to start this guy named Kurt Warner. That was his quote to me. This guy named Kurt Warner. And Al Saunders was there and Dick Vermeil. And so I called him and he said, we'll get an idea. So at the end of the game, he goes, yeah, well, he played pretty well. A couple games later, the rest is history. I mean, they decided to stick with him, and the story, as Dick Vermeil tells it. But Mike really didn't know what he was getting out of Kurt Warner. Well, we know now, a Super Bowl and an MVP of the league, and those guys, that's the outlier. But Purdy's showing that with some believability from a coaching staff, and when the opportunity presents itself, that guys can. Now, he could still to sustain it as a starting quarterback takes more than a game and a half or a game and 3 quarters.
Of course.
But early returns. Well, if you compare him to Trey Lance's first few games, he compares favorably to Trey Lance and a lot of other guys. So he started off, doesn't hurt that he's got great weapons, but part of having great weapons is knowing how to use them and not trying to do too much when you have those great weapons, and then not being afraid to take chances when they're there. So I think it's been great, but there's not, Grant, you won't have Kurt Warner's falling on in your lap on a regular basis, but
no.
And I don't know if Brock Purdy's going to be that guy, but I'll tell you what, he's had a couple eye-opening performances where you're like, damn, This is if the 49ers are going to win a Super Bowl, he needs to play like this, and he's played really, really good football. So they're out there, believability and trust from a coaching staff, and where you don't lose confidence when you haven't had many opportunities. Well, this team is his now until the end of the season at least, and we'll see what goes on in the postseason. So it's been – I'm talking about with him, and let's say he rolls through this and Jimmy's healthy with 2 playoff games to go. What do you do, Grant?
You stay with the hot guy. You don't go to the
right?
bullpen.
I would agree. So I would agree. So the Kurt Warners don't come along often. When they do, even at times coaches are surprised. But they've been bragging about Brock Purdy, and he's lived up to it the first 2 games.
Sean, footnote to that, I actually did an arena football game in the good old barn in Des Moines when Kurt was playing with the Iowa Barnstormers. Who knew, right? It's amazing to see what has happened in his career. Amazing.
I couldn't agree more. And what Kurt Warner learned to do in the Arena League was to throw on time, because it's such a quick game. And you think, well, how's that going to help? Well, think about it now. We talk about get the ball up and out urgently and with accuracy, and a Hall of Fame later. There's going to be another Kurt Warner somewhere. The question is, when is it and who is it?
And obviously, Sean, when you're Purdy and you have arguably the best defense in the NFL. I mean, what a great way to start a football game. And I'm not comparing him to what Trent Dilfer did with Baltimore or, other quarterbacks. But the point is, I mean, that's going to be a nice situation for a quarterback to know that, your defense is going to be able to, get you the ball back often.
Grant, what if I told you right now that if they score 24 points, a game, or they get to 24 points, that nobody's going to beat them?
They're going to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
that's what I would say.
Right, I would agree. And 24 points keeps you normally somewhere in the middle of the offensive pack, right, Grant? When you're averaging that 23 to 25 range, that's going to be somewhere in the middle. They get to 24 points, and they do it on a consistent basis. I don't know if you can beat the 49ers.
Yeah. Sean, I got to tell you something that drives me crazy. One football game that we watched last night, Justin Herbert was excellent, okay? Tua's been hot. And now all of a sudden the narrative on Monday morning is, well, Tua's having a really good year, but he's no Justin Herbert. Can we stop with that crap after one game? It drives me freaking crazy. And you know what? Maybe Tua's not as good as Justin Herbert. I don't know. But that's not something that we, prove with a concrete observation after 60 minutes of football. It drives me crazy.
Well, I remember 3 or 4 weeks ago when we had a national analyst on television called Justin Herbert overrated and a social media quarterback, meaning he made social media throws, he gets the momentum, and people were trying to saying that he is not as good as everybody talks about, meaning Herbert. So now 2 weeks later, and Herbert's never been overrated. He's put up numbers and has been great since he's been in this league. And now 2 weeks after Tua has struggled a couple games, now Tua's overrated and isn't very good, and Herbert's better. It's a weekly narrative that you got to take in the good stuff and spit out the garbage. Tua can't buy into it, and Herbert's just got to keep staying the course. I actually think both are really good players. Herbert, obviously, the measurables are far different than Tua. But you know what? Even the best quarterbacks in the world have had back-to-back bad games. It happens, and Tua did not play well yesterday, and Herbert's a monster. Herbert's been good since he came into the league. Tua's been great all year long, sans these last 2 games, and he's going to be fine. But they got to pick it up because, they want to get some momentum building as they roll along. The Chargers needed this in a huge way, and Herbert played well, not like a social media quarterback, but like a quarterback who's pretty damn good and has been doing that since he came into the league. So I don't understand the fuss, where Herbert's never been bad, and Tua's been good all year long, but 2 starts. So I'm not judging a quarterback and burying him on 2 starts, meaning Tua, and I'm sure as hell not going to tell you that Justin Herbert's just a guy. Justin Herbert's a hell of a football player. I think both are pretty happy with the guy they got on their team.
Yeah, last week against San Francisco, 2 things. He's playing without both his starting tackles, all right? You got Armstead, who's arguably the top left tackle in football. He's not on the field. You're going against the Niners defense, and I'm like, okay, well, if you don't think tackles are important, look at the Super Bowl a couple of years ago when Patrick Mahomes, Mr. All-World, went up against Tampa without his tackles, and they couldn't even score a touchdown. So I don't know why people ignore that.
Yeah, and guess what? If you want to call, say Tua, well, he couldn't do anything against the 49ers. How'd it work for Brady yesterday, the greatest quarterback of all time? Wasn't very good there either, was they threw 50-plus times. They were never in the game. other than the opening kickoff, and Tom struggled with some interceptions, and they weren't very good yesterday. So we know how good Brady is, but even he struggled against that team yesterday. So I'm going to give Tua a little bit of a hall pass. And he just didn't play well against the Chargers. He needs to go back and have a big game next week and get back in the mix.
Sean, you may want to drug test me after I ask you this next question, but if you take San Francisco and Philadelphia and move them to the side, would you not want to play the Detroit? I wouldn't want to see the Detroit Lions on my schedule. What a turnaround for that team, huh?
Now, aside from the teams we talk about, I'm not sure, Grant, and you don't need to be drug tested. It's weird. On my show this morning, I said the two teams you don't want to play in each conference are the Cincinnati Bengals, who we talk about the Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills. Yep. The other guy who's starting to charge, the Cincinnati Bengals. You don't want any part of that guy in Joe Burrow. And the way Goff's throwing it and the way they're playing, if you're a team and you're like, okay, I got to get into the playoffs, or we all made the playoffs, and you draw Detroit if they make it in the first round, I actually think they're going to make the playoffs.
I do, too.
I do.
I do, too.
If you're the team that draws them in the first round, you're like, I'm not real comfortable with this, because they score at a fairly alarming clip, and they're playing good football all the way around. I bet them yesterday, and the Detroit over Minnesota, and I think Minnesota's a good team, but the way they're playing, defense has improved. They're throwing it, and they don't have to throw it 50 times a game. They can, because Goff can spin it, but they're doing a little bit of everything well, and they are feeling it. And I actually think they think they're good now, which is part of the battle.
Yep. Well, I'll tell you something else about Goff, in case people have forgotten. He's won an NFC championship and took a team to a Super Bowl. Did he take it all by himself? No, but he's quarterback in the NFL. So I already know that he can do it if given the opportunity, because I've already seen him do it.
That's exactly right. But you know what the narrative was, Grant? Oh, it's because of it was always everybody else who got him there, yet the dude put up some Pro Bowl numbers under McVay early on, and they just felt like they needed to get to another level. And I get why they did it, and it paid off for them to get Stafford. But I can tell you this, Detroit's sticking with Goff through all this, and Dan Campbell, if you remember, Campbell last year called him out during the season and said, I got my quarterback basically has to play better. And he's responded. So can you imagine going into a playoff game and think, oh, it's Detroit, and then you start looking at tape and you're like, ugh, it's Detroit, but I just soon play somebody else. So you're exactly right. There's teams that are ranked a lot higher, have better records, that I'd take Detroit over right now, that are playoff team. I'm going to tell you right now, Detroit can beat Tampa. I'm going to tell you that.
Oh, hell yes.
As we sit here right now.
I totally agree.
Fact,
yes.
Even if they played them in Tampa, I would favor the Lions.
I would too.
And that's a division. If they played in the AFC, they're winning the AFC South. No disrespect to Mike, but their team doesn't have a lot of weapons on Tennessee, and the other three teams are even though Trevor Lawrence has got them trying to play better. The Detroit Lions win the AFC South. I'm telling you right now they do. So be careful of that team.
All right, so the Vikings all season have pretty much been the cardiac kids. And after Buffalo, that incredible win, they have not been the same team. The following week, they got home and got embarrassed by the Cowboys, barely beat the Pats on Thanksgiving. Now, all of a sudden, a big road game at Detroit. So if I'm a Vikings fan, should I be concerned?
Yeah, I think I think people have been concerned even with the record all year. I'm trying to give them credit, Grant, for saying they've been at a lot of close games, but they were able to win them, which tells me something about resilience. Like the Cowboys. Are the Cowboys bad because the Texans hung around yesterday, or are they good because they made, 10 unanswered points and went 98 yards to win a game against an NFL team that they were supposed to beat by 3 touchdowns, basically 2.5 touchdowns. But in the case of Vikings, I think there's some people out there, Grant, at least I've heard, that even when they were 10-2, some people thought it was fool's gold. I've heard that. And I don't know if it's because of the history of this football team or Kirk Cousins in big games, whatever it is. No matter what the result is, and you saw Justin Jefferson had another 200-plus yards. He had another freak show game, and Cousins played pretty damn well. It's just that Detroit's making the most of it. So I don't know if I'd be worried that they're going to win the division, but the question is, where's the believability and how good are they? I don't know if it's fool's gold, because I think the Vikings are better than the national media says, because they win close games. The problem is they're allowing teams that aren't supposed to beat them, even though Detroit was favored. I'm talking about in other games, hang around a lot, and you're counting on them to make great plays down the stretch in every game, and eventually that becomes exhausting, and you lose some of those, and especially in single elimination, you lose one of those, you go home.
Oh, boy.
The Vikings got to get better.
Well, I bet you if we had 50 people, or
yeah,
I bet you if we had 50 football fans in a room with us, and we took a poll and we said, "Hey, how many of you think the Vikings are going to represent the NFC in a Super Bowl?" I bet you wouldn't get one person to say me.
You get zero, and
Right.
even a Viking fan, yet a Viking homer may say the same thing. That now, and I love the organization, but right now there's no way you'd think they're a Super Bowl
No.
team. That they got weapons everywhere. There's something that bothers people about them, and maybe that's past history. We're in the past, but we're going to find out because they're going to make the playoffs. We're going to see who they are in January.
Sean, how do you analyze a team like the Cowboys, who, as we just said, went into Minnesota and destroyed them, but that's the same team the week before that went to Green Bay and lost to a horrible Packers team, and yesterday had to really struggle to beat maybe the worst. I don't even think it's maybe the worst team in the football in the Texans. I mean, what do you see with the Cowboys?
You know what
about the up and down?
The thing that then they signed, I guess they're going to sign T.Y. Hilton, if I'm not mistaken, today, Grant, who's been a Texans killer. I mean, he's destroyed the Texans many times when he's played them, but trying to revitalize, the Beckham talk, but Beckham may be out till mid-January. So you go get a guy, T.Y. Hilton, who's available. Mm-hmm. If that I think that was done, but if not, it's at least speculation that's going to happen.
Correct.
Is that like yesterday? CeeDee Lamb, they didn't show up with him till late in the game was going on. So
correct.
He's their number one guy, whether it's the offense play calling or him. You can't disappear in games like that. Here's what I think, Grant, and I know they play down to competition sometimes. They do. Now, when you get into the playoffs, if you play up to competition, well, good. You're going to face good teams most of the time in the playoffs. I feel like at times they get casual-minded. Mm-hmm. Meaning they kind of just, and then you saw yesterday, I mean, Dak made a throw. If the Texans don't turn the wrong way with the quarterback down there and punch it in, they capitalize, but you leave the door open, and then when it's all of a sudden, boom, the focus kicks in. But if you're doing that against good teams, they don't win yesterday. If it's a good team, they don't win because that team takes the defensive turnover in the red zone and goes and scores. Or if it's the 49ers, you ain't going 98 yards on the 49ers at the end of a game. You can against the Texans. No. So they have got to understand. And I don't believe in game-to-game momentum. I believe in in-game momentum. And it got to the yesterday that they're so talented, so much more talented that Dak made. Look at the throws he made on the last drive. Phenomenal. But I feel like this team gets a little casual-minded. And I think at times on the play calling it, too, they kind of get away from it because they're supposed to win. And then they laser-focused when it mattered. But it'll be too late against a good team. They were fortunate they played the Texans yesterday. Otherwise, any other team that's in the playoffs in the NFC, they probably get curb stomped unless, of course, they raise their game because the team's good. You can't keep doing this because they're not good enough to turn it on and off like a light switch. They got good players, but in an offense where, listen, Justin Jefferson, he never disappears in an offensive game plan.
It's unbelievable.
CeeDee Lamb, they can't let CeeDee Lamb do that either because at some point in time they're going to take him away, and when they take the run game away as well, how are you going to win? They better find a way.
Sean, as we now approach the middle of December and we're on the final lap of the regular season, where are you in terms of the Buffalo Bills? Are you still as high on them as you were a couple of weeks ago?
Grant, I'm high on them, but if you said, Sean, we went back to the preseason, my picks were Tampa because they had a great roster, and then they lose Lyman and Buffalo to go to the Super Bowl. I had Buffalo winning it. Mm-hmm. Now, I wouldn't waffle. I'll still take them. But I sure said now the weakness, like the South is weak, that one team. You start to look around Denver, you start to look around how some of the divisions, the Chargers had to prove something to us yesterday. The Chiefs had a 28-point lead, and they had to struggle to win when they should have, after what the domination, they got a little too casual as well. And
yes, they did.
With Pat Mahomes throwing 3 picks, creep back into it. I don't think there's any, oh my gosh, no-brainer in the AFC. I don't. Hell, if the Chargers got hot, you telling me they can't? Or right now, to put it this way, you know who's playing better than anybody in the AFC? It's the Bengals.
Yes.
As well as anybody, period. Yes. And I tell you what, Burrow can bury you. And I think they're better this year than they were last year because at least a little improvement on the offensive line when they're healthy. So for me, no, I wouldn't be as adamant about the way I was in the preseason about Buffalo as I am now because I do think defensive injuries are going to cost them. And they're at a point now where they could overcome bad plays and still win against a good team. I don't know if they can throw a red zone interception or two and overcome it. So I'm not sure I would pick them to win the Super Bowl or be in the Super Bowl right now, but I still trust that they've got good enough players to bury you in a certain game. The question is, will the consistency still be there?
Sean, I think it's more than a little bit with the Bengals offensive line.
Yeah.
I think it's significantly better. I think they're playing. I think that's the big difference with the Bengals right now. Obviously, healthy Jamar Chase, but
Keeping
that
him
offensive
upright,
line,
right, Grant? Keeping him upright, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right,
Sean,
let me ask
watched.
you this. Let me ask you this. If you were picking right now and you had $10,000 and had to bet it on an AFC team, and you don't get to spread it out, who are you picking?
I actually probably would go with Cincinnati right now or Kansas City, and I the reason why I'm not picking Buffalo is I'm just disappointed. Disappointed may not be the right word. I'm surprised at how erratic Allen has been, and without Von Miller, I just think that is such a big loss for that team. That's going to impact them in January.
Yeah, the Andy Reid presence gives me think that I may think Kansas City, but here's the other problem. Kansas City can't beat Cincinnati right now.
3 times in a row.
They cannot beat them right now. So the question is it easier to win a 4th in a row, or do the Chiefs have the advantage, or is this a stronghold on what they're doing? Those two teams right now are dangerous. Now Buffalo can kick into high gear, but the AFC at the top's got 3 really good teams that are dangerous, and Cincinnati's one of them.
Sean, I watched your social media posts before you did your morning show in Houston on Mike Leach. I say Mike Leach, you say what?
One of the biggest hearted guys I've ever been around that people may not see. Mike's really, when it comes to his compassion and stuff, Mike cares a lot. He get with the media, he jokes with it, and he's as brilliant a person. I've never been around a guy that can think out of both sides of his brain at the same time. And that I mean that as a compliment. Mike, he is, you see the interviews and the folding chairs and all the stuff that make us laugh, and his great Twitter posts and the things he does. But Mike's a really compassionate, good human being. And I've known Mike for, it's got to be 2+ decades now. Grant, I'm sickened by this. I am. I spent a bunch of time with him. I sat in his office for 3 hours in Starkville this summer, just visiting, went and saw him. They had a camp there, and we went and sat, and the old school laughs that we still have, and Mike's personality. And Mike's one of those guys, I don't know how his mind has done it, but this is a guy who just, and he just kind of goes through it, but his compassion and for people is, people don't talk enough about that, but look at all the posts on social media about him, coaches, players.
Absolutely.
It's unbelievable. How, if you aren't going to judge a guy by what you know about him. I love Mike Leach. Mike Leach is like family because he and my brother went to college together. They have been friends, dear friends for years. And Mike comes to my golf tournament. We've had phenomenal conversations. And Mike is, I love him like family. Well, Mike also is that guy who, if you haven't met Mike Leach and you can't judge him for yourself, all you got to do is say, when Mike's not around, what do people say about him? And have a look from coaches, players he's coached, coaches he's coached. And I know everybody goes through their stuff. Mike's a stud. And I'll tell you another word, Mike's stubborn. That's why you always think, Mike can do anything because he's stubborn. And I mean that in an affectionate way. Some of the best people I've been around are stubborn with the way they think, and you're not talking them out of it. And I'm heartbroken. It's emotional for me. It was a rough day. You constantly watch, and to hear what I hear and where he is right now, it scares me because I think about the guy I was talking to a few months ago, and then the guy been texting back and forth, and then all of a sudden we're in a situation, and I'm trying to picture myself how his good wife Sharon, I'm assuming those two were to by themselves when this happened, and family getting ready for the holidays. And what must she have gone through or be going through right now? I can't even. It's gut wrenching for me because Mike has always treated me and my family and people around. Everybody wants to talk about. When you mention his name, people want to know about him. And I judge people by how they treat me, but also how they treat people that can't do anything for them. And Mike is consistently a phenomenal human being. And we need to tell people how we feel about him while they're not going through this. Yeah. That's one thing I've never understood. It's okay to tell somebody you care about them and love them while they're healthy, not while they're going through a fight. And Mike's in the fight for his life. And I don't know what's going to happen, Grant, but the reports aren't good. And the reverence that we need to approach this with and give the family the respect that they deserve. But you pray for miracles, and I pray for Mike, but hell, 2 days ago, the guy's, planning on recruiting and getting ready for a bowl game. And today, guy's in a fight for his life. And so, yeah, I'm sickened by it. I love Mike. I love him. He's been family. So family would be first, but he's more compassionate than people can even imagine. And he is as bright as any human being I've ever been around. He'll fight you now. He will battle you.
You said your brother went to college with him, but for you, when did your paths first cross with Mike?
Years ago, probably in the I want to think mid-90s, Grant, somewhere like that, mid-90s, somewhere in there, like the mid to late 90s. So what is that, 25 years? And I'll never forget, Mike and I were at my golf tournament. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. It's the night before. Everybody's having a blast, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mike's the guy, drink in one hand, a dip in his hand, wants to talk about, Winston Churchill. And then I'll never forget, we're standing in a hallway, and Mike's like, because Mike doesn't sleep much. You could call Mike at 2:30 in the morning and get him wide awake. I'm dead serious. My brother and I were talking today. He said, last time I talked to Mike, we're up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Mike and then don't reach Mike at 7 in the morning, but you can reach him at 2:30. And I mean this affection. That's him. But
right.
We're standing in the hallway of my golf tournament, and we've had a blast of a day getting ready, and it's just phenomenal. And Mike, we're talking about different things. And then Mike wants to talk about, Sean, with this, how would you attack this coverage? And I'm sitting there thinking, how would I attack it? I want to know how you attack it. So he's always thinking on a little piece of paper about different ways to do things. And he's brilliant. And Mike's a guy who craves knowledge, and that's obvious. But sense of humor is off the charts. We had so many laughs this summer. So the last time, I'm so glad I got to spend time with him. And God forbid it'll be the last time. But I'm so glad I got to that. Walking out of that office, I was crying, laughing, thinking, that's my guy. And here we are now in the fight for his life, and it makes me sick to my stomach.
Well, that's all I can say is wow. I want to end on a good note. And you and I talked on Friday about the Army-Navy game, and I saw Navy is going to go in a different direction with their head coach. But I got to tell you, Sean, as I said, I couldn't name you one player on either team leading up to that game, but I just loved watching that. What an ending in that game.
Oh, my God. I watched it too, Grant, and if he did, the emotion from Mike Leach carries over. But you think about that game, and I get choked up when I watch that game.
Yeah.
I felt so bad for the running back who had such a good game, who laid the ball on the ground, and you saw the anguish.
Yeah.
And then I think, man, our country's in good shape because these guys, and I read a quote that said, think about this, that the guys on this field are the ones that they're willing to take a bullet for everybody that's watching them on television or in the stadium. Every single friggin' one of them. And the anguish that young man went through, while I'm an Army guy because my dad was 82nd Airborne, but I still love them both. And you can't name any of the players, but they're going to go on to be generals and lead companies and make a difference. And you also look and say, I do know who Coach Monken and Coach Ken are. And Coach Ken, one of the classy, and I don't even try to pronounce his last name. And that's not disrespect. I've called him Coach Ken forever. And if he wants to keep coaching, he will, because you think about all those times at Navy, Grant, how many times he was mentioned for other jobs. What a class individual. What an honor it must be for those coaches. And I've talked to Coach Monken before because I've done a game that that he's coached when they played North Texas. And the regard in which they hold their players and the expectations. I felt sick for the running back. I did. I'm grateful that Army won. It was one hell of a game. You complete like 3 balls or 4 balls in the game. The Navy guys, Grant, do you know that Navy they had 4 completions this season? 4. I think it was either Army or Navy. Four. Yet those guys are battling, and they're going to walk off that field and get back to knowing that someday they may be in the front lines of a battle. But you saw how much it meant to them, and I felt horrible for that young man's anguish laying it on the ground. But when you sing last, that's big, and Army was able to sing last this year. And to Coach Ken, thanks. Yeah. Coach Monken, thanks, you guys, and all you military academies. But Coach Ken will go on and do great things. And I get moved by that game regularly. And to John Finch, thank you for the compliment too about the analyst. I appreciate it. But I get too emotional into these things. But I hold it tightly with Mike Leach and with the bigger picture, Grant. And today there's a lot of things bigger going on more than X's and O's. And
Yep.
And I'm feeling it for those guys and pray that miracles happen.
Sean, I'm very good friends back in my old neighborhood in California with a couple of former Navy pilots. They went to the Naval Academy. They flew in the Gulf War. They're now both pilots for United Airlines. And so when I was home, not on the road with the Kings, every Army-Navy game, we'd get to his house early in the morning, and they had all their Navy garb on and everything else. And I've never been to a Army-Navy game. I've always wanted to. But hearing their stories of what it was like being in the stadium on that day and everything else and hearing all of their stories was quite a educational experience for me. I learned a lot, but the fact that Army Navy, we watch it through the lens of TV, but to hear their stories, man, it's the best rivalry in college football, Sean. No disrespect to you playing against Notre Dame, but
right.
Army Navy is unbelievable.
It's a little bit bigger than put the pigskin in the end zone because of all think about the great players that have played in this game over the course of time, from Roger Staubach. I mean, phenomenal. And you think no matter what happens during the year, and neither Navy or Army had their best seasons, and they're both capable of. And I don't know how you defend that triple option on a regular basis. Good luck trying to defend it when you're somebody who doesn't play against it every day. But when you hear them talk, no matter what, our whole year as an athlete, when they're there, is designed for this game.
Yeah.
That's not to disrespect other opponents when you play Notre Dame as Navy and Army's playing, but the thought process in West Point and then, in Annapolis, what must go on all year long. And now they're already gearing up for how they're going to prepare for next year's. But I consider it an honor to watch that game, and that's why I do it.
Yeah. Sean, I love you, buddy. I appreciate the heck out of you, and I just love spending time with you, and you have a great week.
I love you, too. I appreciate it. And going out, I won't be able to do Friday, Grant.
Yep.
Just to let the people know, I am I'm the offensive coordinator for Houston Nuts Squad in the Army High School All-American game in Dallas. So I head to Dallas tomorrow. I don't know what we're going to do, but I can tell you one thing. We ain't running a triple option. We're going to throw it a whole bunch. So my quarterbacks better loosen that arm up. We may go down in flame, but we are going to let it rip. So we'll have some fun this week. Houston Nuts going to say, damn, if I had Sean around when I was coaching the other ones, we'd lead the lead. I'm going to find me a Heisman Trophy winner throwing it like 40 times this week, brother.
I love it. Hey, you take care, buddy.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, man. I appreciate you.
Oh, man. Sean Salisbury is so awesome. That is beautiful. Hey, I want to also tell you that we are brought to you by Foster's and Paws, and they do really great things. They are really, after doing a little bit of more research and talking with people that are affiliated with Foster's and Paws, it's pretty amazing what they do. They're a group, they're passionate, they're animal advocates, and they work hard to save lives. And they primarily focus on vulnerable dogs in shelters. They do a lot of things differently. And I'll tell you, I love the fact that they work with children at a young age to teach them how to treat animals with respect, which can really have lifelong benefits. All you need to do is go to fostersandpaws.org/adopt. That's Fosters and Paws. All right, the Sacramento Kings tomorrow in Philadelphia. De'Aaron Fox did practice today, and that is good news. Now, I did a rant on this, and for those of you that missed the rant, I just want to summarize. Davion Mitchell's very good for the Kings, and he's an important part of what they do. As of today, okay, December of 2022, he's not a legitimate starting NBA point guard. He's not an offensive guy, which you absolutely have to have at the point guard position. I'm not nullifying, I'm not discounting what he does on defense. But the Milwaukee game, game one of this 6-game trip, what was the talk on my post-game show when Ryan and I were together? It was De'Aaron Fox can't do this, he can't do that, he's inconsistent. Obviously, he's been hurt, and now he's missed the last 2 games and hopeful to play tomorrow against Philadelphia. Do you get an idea now after watching 2 games against Cleveland, which they had that 19-0 run to come from behind and win, and the Knicks game yesterday, why Fox is so important to this team and that his offense is sorely lacking right now. And, oh, yeah, by the way, he's now missed 3 games this year. And if you take the Kings' record, 3 games over 500, and you take the 3 games off the schedule where they're 1-2, other than 4 games maybe this year, 5 at the very most, but I'll say 4. He's played at an A level. And yet when he doesn't perform well, like he has not the last 2 weeks, and again, I think it's very clear that he has been dealing with an ailment, and it's been proven that it was his foot. You can see how important he is to this team. I'm not saying that he's Steph Curry, all right? I'm not saying he's Luka Doncic. I'm not saying that he's Ja Morant. What I am saying is he's a very good player. Is he an all-star? Maybe he's not, okay? Maybe he's not. Maybe he's just on the tier underneath all-star level. We'll find out, okay? The all-star game's not for a couple of months. But can we acknowledge that De'Aaron Fox is really important to the Sacramento Kings? And again, I'm not anointing him as the greatest thing I've ever seen since sliced bread, all right? I'm not saying he is the best point guard in the NBA. What I am saying is sometimes it takes someone going away for a little bit to really appreciate them. And I will tell you that after watching Sacramento play against Cleveland, which was a very fortunate victory, and I'm not taking anything away from the Kings in that game, but, you know, the Cavs also didn't have their best player in Donovan Mitchell. And then after watching the Kings play a lackluster offensive game yesterday against the Knicks, then it reinforces to me how important Fox is to the Sacramento Kings. Yeah, I hope that Kevin Huerter can have a big game too. So it's Philadelphia tomorrow. I'll be on right after that game here on YouTube Live. Then the next night, Toronto, and then they wrap it up with a game against the Detroit Pistons. Hey, I appreciate all of you. I'm going to get ready to do my show on Listen App. Don't forget, right here on Wednesday at 3 o'clock Pacific, Jerry Reynolds. Yes, the one and only Jerry Reynolds will be with me, and we got a great week playing. So I hope you can join me over on Listen App. I really appreciate Sean. I appreciate all of you and your support. Appreciate all the messages. I hope you have a fabulous day, and thank you so much for checking us out right here. If you don't like that, with Grant Napier. So long, everybody.